All right, here we go. The very same people who forced Joe Biden on us 4 years ago instead of Bernie are now telling us we got to dump him. Everybody needs to calm the F down. Biden's debate performance wasn't so horrible. And the Supreme Court's ruling on presidential immunity Monday isn't the end of the world. Possibly the end of our democracy, but it's not the end of the world. I told you the court would kick it back down to the lower courts for clarification to buy Trump time. That's exactly what happened yesterday. And as I've said countless times since Trump was convicted in May, I don't want him going on trial anymore before Election Day. Trials give Trump a bump in the polls. I want him running on the issues, not as just another aggrieved white male trying to convince low information voters that he's a victim of America's two-tier justice system. I'm going to talk about the Supreme Court ruling on today's show, and I'm also going to be talking about calls for Joe Biden to step aside. I'm going to remind all of you to calm the F down. This isn't our first presidential election. This isn't our first national crisis. Let's go to the map. Look at the map. This is my security blanket. I built this map a month ago. It's an electoral map of the continental United States, okay? And here in America, you do not win the presidency by winning debates or by winning the popular vote. Trump proved that back in 2016. You win the presidency by winning the Electoral College. Now look, I'm going to go big here if I can. I want you to look at this, okay? This is the Electoral College map that I created. Alaska isn't here, nor is Hawaii. Just remember, Alaska is red, Hawaii is blue. And that's not going to change, okay? Nothing is going to change Alaska from being red or Hawaii from being blue. I have catastrophized for you. I have given everything imaginable to Donald Trump. This is the catastrophe map that I hold with me as I try to fall asleep. I am giving Nevada, Arizona, Georgia, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio. I'm giving them all to Trump. There are but 3 states that Biden needs to win: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer did not say Biden lost Michigan. She said, I don't know how that got spread, but she did not say after the debate that Biden just lost Michigan. In fact, Trump lost Michigan during the debate. And out on the campaign, he's losing Michigan. He is using the word Palestinian as a pejorative. He called Biden a Palestinian. He called Chuck Schumer a Palestinian, as though being a Palestinian is a bad thing. There's a large Arab and Muslim population in Michigan, as well as Arizona, and they are not voting for Donald Trump. During the debate, Donald Trump said he would let Netanyahu finish the job in Gaza, while Joe Biden is working around the clock trying to get a ceasefire. Joe Biden is going to win Michigan. He's winning Wisconsin, and he's winning Pennsylvania. Take a look at the map. When he wins Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania, that's the game. Here, this is the final count. Joe Biden gets 270. Trump gets 268. You need 270 to win. Biden gets 270. Trump won't accept the results. Doesn't matter. This is the worst case scenario. Biden wins the Electoral College by 2. All the other states, all the other blue states you see on this map are set in blue. Nothing else is changing. Washington, Oregon, New Mexico, Colorado, Illinois, Wisconsin. Nothing is changing, including Minnesota. Joe Biden's going to win, whether he knows it or not. Joe Biden is going to win this, so calm the F down and stop cannibalizing our own. This is what we tend to do in the Democratic Party. We beat up on our own. Can you imagine, had Bernie become president, what this party would have done to him? We had a debate watch party Thursday. It was a disaster. I'll get to that in a second. The debate was a disaster. The party was fantastic. I got to meet a lot of listeners and talk with some old friends. It didn't go well for my president, but it's not the end of the world. And let's be fair, you cannot control Donald Trump, and we can't control his voters and the propaganda machine propping him up. So we are tempted to turn on ourselves because that's the only control we have. Since we can't get rid of Trump, some of us decide to get rid of Biden. It makes some of you feel like you have some control. Knock it off. This is as bad as it's going to get for Joe Biden. Better to have the bad debate performance now than after Labor Day. Yes, you're being hit by a flood of bad news. Calm the F down. The court did exactly what we knew it would do on Monday. I'll explain why it's horrible. The court is horrible. It's the worst Supreme Court in, a century? But in the end, this ruling is no big deal. I'm not going to cast blame, but I am. None of this would have happened if some of you voted for Hillary back in 2016. This court, had Hillary won in 2016, this court right now would be a 6-3 majority for liberals, had Hillary won in 2016. All it took was fewer than 100,000 votes in 3 key swing states, and Hillary would have won the Electoral College. She won the popular vote. Was Hillary perfect? Compared to Bernie, not even close. Compared to Trump, yes, she was perfect. Is Biden perfect? Compared to Bernie, not even close. Compared to Elizabeth Warren, not even close. Compared to Trump, yes, he's perfect. I hosted my first Zoom watch party in more than a year on Thursday. Now, there's a reason I stopped doing these Zoom meetups. I had built, some of you know, I had built a community of about several hundred people, about 200 or 300 people. We did benefits. It was a mutual aid society where we try to help people in the community who were struggling financially. We had discussion groups, and I kept it going for more than 2 years. And when it got too big for me, I needed help. And some of the people who said they would help me destroyed it. It's what human beings do. They destroy things if they can't control it. And it's really easy to break things. I learned that watching my Zoom community fall apart. It's really easy to be a wrecking ball, to stand off to the side and tell me what I'm doing wrong. Not so easy to build something and then keep it going. And I failed. I couldn't keep it going. So I have some sympathy for Joe Biden. He's trying to keep a community of Democrats together, and it's next to impossible. They feast on one another, as do the Republicans. Now, I think I have all the solutions. We all think we have the solutions, but when you have to work with other people and try to get them to walk in your direction, it's next to impossible. There are a lot of Joe Manchins in everybody's community. There are a lot of Kirsten Sinemas in everybody's community. And there are a lot of people right now trying to destroy Joe Biden from within. And it's a miracle that he was able to pass as much legislation as he has, considering what he's up against, not just from the Republicans, but from his own party. Later on, I'll explain why it's okay to have a president who has his good days and his bad days. The system is designed specifically for a president, an older president, who has his good days and his bad days. There's not going to be a Katrina. There's not going to be a financial collapse or a 9/11 on Joe Biden's watch. It's just not going to happen. Awake, asleep, senile, fully functional, it's not going to happen. Joe Biden can be in half a coma, and the executive branch under him will run smoothly because Democrats, despite all their problems, bring competence to governance. Not necessarily competence to politics, but when you get them elected, when you put them in the White House, they bring competence. Clinton, Obama, Biden, highly problematic. They do a lot of favors for Wall Street and the corporate donor class, but they prevent disasters. And when natural disasters occur, they're on it immediately. So calm the F down, everybody. Biden, I don't think, is quitting. Now, maybe if his poll numbers tank, which I don't think is going to happen unless his poll numbers tank within the next month by August 1st, I don't think he's going anywhere, and he doesn't need to. We just need to get on board and get him elected. We have a vice president, Kamala Harris, who will be fine if, God forbid, Joe is reelected and has to resign or worse. Charles de Gaulle famously said our cemeteries are filled with indispensable men. Nobody's indispensable. We can swap Joe out for Vice President Harris after he's reelected. She'll be no different from Joe Biden, Clinton, or Obama, and quite frankly, that's the problem. The other issue I have in swapping Biden for Kamala Harris right now is I think Trump might have an easy time beating her. I'm not sure. I say, unless Joe's poll numbers tank, keep him on the ticket. I'll go over this and the Supreme Court ruling, but first, this is the mop-up for July 2nd, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. Please hit the like button so I remain in your feed, and hit the notifications bell so you always know when I'm going live or when there's a new episode. Yes, I'm drinking coffee. If you would like a transcript of today's episode, go to shopdavidfeldman.com. The transcripts are made possible by the, let's just call them idiots. I'm going to be kind here and just call them idiots who buy garbage over at shopdavidfeldman.com, like this Rudy Giuliani mugshot coffee mug. This is my big get-rich-quick scheme. Rudy Giuliani, his mugshot on a coffee mug. It's Rudy's coffee mugshot. Some of you bought that. Or this Donald Trump mugshot coffee mug. I'm going to get rich. I'm telling you. I've already sold, I think, 4 of these. I'm also selling this, the Still a Democrat t-shirt. It's a heart that's been wounded, the Still a Democrat coffee mug, and of course my Made in Los Estados Unidos coffee mug. Thanks to all of you foolish enough to waste your money on worthless garbage over at shopdavidfeldman.com. There are plenty of freebies over there. Of course, the transcripts. There's a Harvard diploma. And don't forget to subscribe while you're over there to my newsletter. We had a Zoom watch party on Thursday to watch the debate. Thank you to everyone who showed up. Now, I only pay for a Zoom room that holds 500. I didn't think we would max out. I never maxed out before. We did Thursday night. And some of you who paid the registration fee, some of you couldn't get in, and I think I have reimbursed everyone who paid to get in and then couldn't. I am really sorry about this. If you paid the registration fee and then tried to join but you couldn't, please let me know. I think I've reimbursed everybody. If you couldn't get in but you paid the registration fee, you received a confirmation email right after you signed up. Please contact us via the email provided in that confirmation email so we can issue a refund. Again, I am sorry. I didn't think we were going to. I've never maxed out that room before. And I had a great time, got to meet some of the listeners. It was a depressing evening watching Joe Biden under the weather. But it was comforting to watch it with other people and then grouse afterwards. So, calm the F down. Let me assure you, nobody on our side is rolling over and allowing Trump or his ill-bred punks to take over this country. And even should the impossible, the unthinkable happen, and somehow Trump steals back the presidency, this country is filled with millions and millions and millions of Americans who are going to fight. We're going to fight for our country. You're not alone. If you're worried about Donald Trump winning, you're not alone. It might feel that way because we've been so atomized off in our own little echo chamber. We feel we're the only ones who are scared, paralyzed, but you're not alone. There are millions and millions who are going to fight for this country the same way we did during the 4 years of Donald Trump's first term. For example, Trump's old campaign manager, Steve Bannon, reported to a Danbury, Connecticut federal prison yesterday. He, along with Trump's White House economic advisor, Peter Navarro, were sentenced to 4 months in prison after being convicted of contempt of Congress for their refusal to testify before the January 6 committee. Bannon on Monday held a press conference where he tried to compare himself to Ring Lardner Jr. This is a picture of Ring Lardner's father, who was a sports reporter, but Ring Lardner Jr. also served in the very same prison Bannon is in tonight. He served in it back in the 50s for contempt of Congress, just like Steve Bannon. Ring Lardner Jr. was one of the Hollywood 10 blacklisted Hollywood writers with heavily leftist views who at one time were communist sympathizers, perhaps, and they refused to answer questions before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Ring Lardner Jr. refused to name names. He refused to tell the committee of anybody he knew who, like himself, might have once been a communist sympathizer. And for that, he served a full year in prison for contempt of Congress. He served that year in the very same federal prison Steve Bannon is in this morning. And Bannon had the audacity, before he went into prison, to hold a press conference where he compared himself to Ring Lardner Jr. Steve Bannon is a fascist. Ring Lardner Jr.'s brother died in 1938 fighting fascists in Spain. And we are fighting fascists. Steve Bannon is one of them. Here is Bannon trying to compare himself to the leftist hero Ring Lardner Jr., who, when he was no longer blacklisted, went on to write the movie MASH. If you think you're alone, if you think we're going to roll over and let Trump destroy this country, watch Steve Bannon and Marjorie Taylor Greene, and right behind him, Bernard Kerik, police commissioner under Rudy Giuliani, who did, 3 years in prison. Watch Steve Bannon try to give his farewell press conference before going into prison as he compares himself to Ring Lardner Jr.
Folks, if it took me going to prison, remember, the reason I chose Danbury, I asked for Danbury for a very specific reason. Back in the only other person that's ever been sent to prison for a congressional subpoena, not going to a house subpoena for contempt, held in contempt, was Ring Lardner Jr. Back in the 1940s, during the House Un-American Activity investigation, Columbia Studio fired him, because of his political beliefs. And then he was found guilty. They sent it to the DOJ. He was sent to prison. He was sent to this prison. That's why I requested Danbury, because there's no difference in his fight and in our fight. I'm a political prisoner of Nancy Pelosi. I'm a political prisoner of Merrick Garland. I'm a political prisoner. I'm a political prisoner of Joe Biden, the corrupt Biden establishment.
See how this is going to work? See how this works? If these fascists take over, you're not alone. Okay? Steve Bannon went to prison, and the last thing he heard on the outside was criminal fascist. And that's what he has to remember for the next 4 months. Okay? You're not alone. We're not going to roll over. We didn't roll over when Trump won in 2016. And we're not going to roll over again if, God forbid, the unthinkable happens. Thursday night's debate, where CNN platformed Donald Trump and allowed him to spew lies without correcting him once, was watched by 50 million people. That's according to Variety. Actually, it was watched by fewer than 50 million people. Jake Tapper and Anderson Cooper over at CNN spent yesterday defending CNN's decision not to fact-check Trump's hundreds of lies. Because why would you expect a news organization to check facts? They said it was Biden's job to correct those lies. No, it is beneath the President of the United States to have to take on what is commonly referred to as the Gish Gallop, where your opponent, Donald Trump, is free to just spew one lie after another with impunity because the moderators refuse to do their job. Every single thing that Trump said was a lie. It was the height of irresponsibility to put it on Joe Biden to fact-check those lies. CNN once said it learned its lessons from 2016 and that it wasn't going to platform fascists, lying fascists like Donald Trump. You might remember during last year's town hall on CNN, I think it was Caitlin Collins, I think that's her name, she tried to correct some of Trump's lies. She tried. Dana Bash and Jake Tapper didn't even try. Not once. Candy Crowley, formerly of CNN, corrected Mitt Romney's lies back in 2012 when Barack Obama debated Romney. Bash and Tapper never even tried, because that was the deal, to get Trump to agree to come on their struggling network. So congratulations, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. You were loyal corporate foot soldiers. CNN got in their 4 commercial breaks and made some money for Discovery, their corporate owner. Good for you, Jake Tapper and Dana Bash. The Financial Times reports that despite drawing in fewer than 50 million viewers across 17 different platforms, that CNN debate was thankfully one of the least watched presidential debates in American history. I don't even think Joe Biden was watching it. It drew an audience that was 35% smaller than the audience they had for the first Biden-Trump debate back in 2020. It was the smallest audience for a presidential debate in more than 20 years. How's it going to move the polls? We'll see. I'll have some polling for you in a few minutes. Instead of talking about Trump's mountain of lies that were left unchecked by Jake Tapper and Dana Bash, all anyone could really talk about immediately after was how old Joe Biden sounded, how old he looked. Nobody talked about Donald Trump threatening to lock up his opponents. Nobody talked about how Donald Trump said he would let Netanyahu finish the job in Gaza, or how he would round up millions and millions of undocumented immigrants and ship them out of this country. No, all anybody talked about was how old Joe Biden looked and sounded. The New York Times the next day said in an editorial that it's time for Joe Biden to step aside. That is the official editorial policy now of the New York Times, that based on Joe Biden's one performance, he needs to step aside. The Atlanta Journal-Constitution pretty much wrote the same thing, as did The Economist, which said Biden should yield to a younger candidate. David Remnick, the publisher of The New Yorker, took to the pages of his magazine and advised Joe Biden to quit. Bob Woodward, the investigative reporter who's covered Washington since Nixon was president, called Biden's performance a political H-bomb. Everyone, immediately after the debate, needs to have an opinion. You have to have your hot take. And yet, the Supreme Court heard oral arguments on presidential immunity more than 2 months ago. They finally issued their opinion. Not a good one, but it's okay to wait a couple of weeks before you have an opinion. But Bob Woodward, The Economist, The New York Times, The New Yorker, Maureen Dowd all decided Biden has to go after one bad debate. The Wall Street Journal accused Democrats of ignoring all the warning signs that Biden was deteriorating months before the debate. Bernie Sanders and Congressman Jamie Raskin admitted, yeah, Biden didn't have a good night. Bernie said Biden, quote, was not terribly articulate, to say the least. That's true. Jamie Raskin said Biden will not be replaced, but intimated the conversation is being had. Yes, there should be this conversation, not this hysteria. And like I say, if the polls have cratered by August 1st, then it's time to talk about a replacement. But we may not see the cratering that everyone's predicting. Speaker Mike Johnson immediately called on Biden's cabinet to invoke the 25th Amendment and remove him from office. And yet when Donald Trump snapped and instigated an insurrection where nearly 150 Capitol police officers were assaulted and had to go to the hospital, Mike Johnson saw no need to invoke the 25th Amendment to remove that certifiable lunatic from the Oval Office. Panic set in as everyone needed a hot take after one bad debate performance. Axios reported that 60% of all voters in a new poll want Joe Biden replaced after the debate. But how many want Trump replaced after the debate? They didn't tell us that, or at least it's not in the headline. Thankfully, the Philadelphia Inquirer's editorial page came to the defense of Biden by saying that after that debate, it's clear to anyone who watched that it is Donald Trump who should be leaving the race. So, are Democrats going to fight for their party, or are they going to roll over? I like to think they're in panic mode right now, but eventually they're going to realize that Joe Biden is not quitting. He's staying in the race. As for now, as the Financial Times reports, Democrats are pondering the unthinkable, getting rid of Biden. But here's an idea. Instead of pondering the unthinkable, get to work on pondering him reelected. Let's wait a month and see how bad the polls are. Biden's performance last Thursday was disheartening. I'll have more to say on whether he needs to step aside later on this week. Let me just say this, and then I want to get on to the Supreme Court ruling. Instead of panicking, if we see, I'm going to say this again, if we see major cratering in reliable polls, then I would be open a month from now to replacing him. But short of that, I'm not sure replacing Joe Biden is the answer. The problem isn't Joe Biden. The problem is the Democratic Party. I don't trust this party to pick someone who can be moved as far to the left as Joe Biden has been moved over the past 3.5 years. You know, we joked on this show about moving Joe Biden to the left back in 2020 and 2021 as though it was impossible. He's not a leftist, he's a corporatist, but his legislative record is left of center. He has surprised everyone because he catered to Bernie and Elizabeth Warren. He saw the rise of populism on the left and the rise of faux populism on the right, and he said, I better do something. I better appeal to the real populists, or they're going to fall once again for the fake populist, Donald Trump. Now, look, I watched the debate. I don't think Biden did all that poorly. I think a lot of people are taking out their frustration with Trump and CNN. I think they're taking it out on Joe Biden. Any reasonable person can see that Biden walked into an ambush. He wasn't debating issues. He was debating facts, lies. Most importantly, he's been a great president. Everyone is a mixed bag, and you have to take the good with the bad, and the good in Joe Biden far outweighs the bad. There is nothing good about Donald Trump. For better or worse, in sickness or in health, Joe Biden is the most successful president in my lifetime. But he's old, and that's why he's the most successful president in my lifetime. He's old. Yes, with old age. And there's no question Joe's in that phase of the life cycle. With old age comes some minor cognitive issues. You have your good days and you have your bad days. It doesn't matter because the job of president, I hate to break it to you, isn't all that important. We have a Senate, we have a House, and a horrible Supreme Court. The job of president is only important when someone dangerous like Donald Trump gets the job and runs roughshod over centuries of norms and criminal statutes. The system was set up precisely for a president like Joe Biden, not Trump. The system was set up for Joe Biden, even or especially because he's a little slow on the take. Our government isn't run by the president. It's not supposed to be run by the president. He's just a major part of it. At least that's the way it's supposed to work when you have a chief executive who obeys the law. Yes, there are disasters a president must reckon with. But does anyone think Joe Biden lacks the cognition to deal with, New Orleans about to be hit by Hurricane Katrina? You think he could handle Hurricane Katrina the way a much younger George W. Bush could not? You think Hurricane Katrina would happen on Joe Biden's watch? Do you think for a second Joe Biden wouldn't be prepared to help after a Category 4, Category 5 hurricane? Do you, for 1 second, think Joe Biden would ignore intelligence briefings about COVID? Do you think he would ignore an intelligence briefing that says Osama bin Laden is intent on attacking the United States by flying planes into buildings? You know, the way Trump ignored the COVID briefings, the way George W. Bush ignored the Al-Qaeda briefings. Do you think for 1 second Joe Biden, who stumbled and said in the debate, quote, "We finally beat Medicare," as though it was a crime against humanity that he said, "We finally beat Medicare"? Well, do you think he would cut Medicare? Do you think he would ever cut Social Security? He's already said he's not going to renew the Trump tax cuts for the wealthy. The man has a stutter, and it's getting worse. He's gotten older. Some days he's more tired than others. He had a cold Thursday night. Who cares? A presidency doesn't come down to one bad debate performance. He is the personification of competence. Biden is not going to send troops into the Middle East or Ukraine. He did not botch the exit from Afghanistan. It's one of the best decisions of his presidency, pulling out. Presidents can be old, lumbering, and slow. In fact, that's a good thing. It means he surrounded himself with competent people. It's why Republicans voted to reelect Reagan, even though we now know, and most of us knew back then, Reagan was in the early stages of Alzheimer's. The world spins with or without us. The presidency shouldn't be so important that we need someone working the Oval Office 24/7, touching everything, questioning everyone. One of the reasons Jimmy Carter, God bless his soul, one of the reasons he was considered, let's say, a failed president is because he never learned how to delegate. When he was president, he didn't trust people. The key to running any organization is find the best people and then make sure they have what they need to be their best. You do not want a frantic commander-in-chief. That's who Donald Trump was, a frantic commander-in-chief who thrived on chaos. He created chaos and thrived on it. He would give out orders, then retract them. He would give out 3 separate orders that countermanded the other one to 3 different people. He would play all his staffers against one another, so only he could be in charge, the divide and conquer type of boss. We've all had that, where if I get everybody working against one another, there'll be chaos, and I can step in and be the savior. That's how Trump ruled, and that's why he accomplished nothing other than cutting taxes for the wealthy and adding $8 trillion to our debt. And truth be told, he didn't cut taxes for the wealthy. Then Speaker of the House, Paul Ryan, cut taxes for the wealthy. Trump accomplished nothing other than killing 1 million Americans because of his botched COVID response. Every week was supposed to be Infrastructure Week with Donald Trump. Never happened. Joe Biden, bipartisan infrastructure bill. Are you driving down the highways? Do you see all the repair work? Do you see the signs that Ted Cruz wants taken down? Repair work thanks to the Bipartisan Infrastructure Act. This is just one of many signature pieces of legislation that Joe Biden, in his senescence, has been able to pass. That 3 a.m. proverbial phone call is garbage. Remember that? Who do you want picking up the phone at 3 a.m.? Remember those commercials? I think it was when Obama and Hillary were running for president, McCain was running for president. Who's going to be able to answer the phone at 3 a.m.? There is nothing a president is going to be told at 3 a.m. that can't wait another 12 hours. I hate to break it to you. It's not that important a job, especially if you're running a tight ship. The 3 a.m. phone call is horseshit. Now, you might remember the war criminal George W. Bush ignored intelligence briefings, which resulted in 9/11. He wasn't back at the White House until 12 hours later. Remember? He was told by Andy Card, as chief of staff, America is under attack. And he sat for 7 minutes? And continued to read My Pet Goat with the school children. Why? Because the president isn't that important. George W. Bush wasn't back at the White House until about 12 hours later. He was flying around the country, terrified that he was going to get shot out of the sky. We had war criminal Dick Cheney in the Situation Room. The job of president isn't important. It's only important when the president breaks the law, when the president lies his way into a war, or tries to trade arms for hostages and fund the Contras in Nicaragua, or when he tries to steal an election. The job of president is only important when he abuses the power that comes with the job. The job is only important because of the proactive damage a bad president like Ronald Reagan, George W. Bush, and Donald Trump can do. But when you have a responsible statesman like Joe Biden, the ship of state runs perfectly fine, and it can ride out the storms without even waking the captain at 3 a.m. Wars are not declared overnight. It takes months, if not years, to mobilize our troops and to start a war. There's no such thing as a surprise attack. 9/11 was a surprise attack because George W. Bush, the war criminal, didn't read the intelligence reports. We knew that Putin was going to invade Ukraine. Benjamin Netanyahu didn't know Hamas was going to invade Israel. If you're incompetent, like Benjamin Netanyahu or George W. Bush, if you're not a statesman, yeah, mistakes, big fatal mistakes are going to happen on your watch. But when you have competent leaders, this doesn't happen. This idea of a ticking time bomb where a president has 24 hours to dismantle it, that works fine in movies. It's not real life. So calm the F down. Should the stock market plunge, if the economy craters due to unforeseen circumstances, going slow and steady is good. What we need right now, this late in the game, with 4 months left, what we need right now is to get Joe Biden reelected by any means necessary, as long as it's legal. We need the Democrats to win the House and keep the Senate. Then you have Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer, and Hakeem Jeffries running the show. Should we win the White House and both houses of Congress, then Joe Biden will be 1/3 of our government. We will be ruled by there's the Supreme Court, but we will be essentially ruled by a triumvirate: Biden, Jeffries, and Schumer. And that's exactly what our founding fathers intended. Look, I wanted Bernie. And Bernie has done a great job moving Biden more to the left, a little to the left. It took a lot of effort to get Joe Biden on board a lot of left-of-center policies, expanding the child tax credit, forgiving student debt, the eviction moratorium, and hundreds of others of executive orders protecting our environment and taking on the gun lobbyists. He's got a Supreme Court that has reversed some of those executive orders. There's only so much a president can accomplish when you've got a House of Representatives, a Supreme Court, and the American people who aren't completely on board all your policies. Pay attention to the polling. Look at what and who the American voter is. Unfortunately, we have a problem with the American voter. So I don't trust the Democratic Party to find the right replacement for Joe Biden. And even if they did find the right replacement, I don't trust this Democratic Party to get fully behind that candidate. There are way too many ambitious millionaires and billionaires running the Democratic Party who could write out another 4 years of Donald Trump. They don't have that much to lose. It's a little late in the game to realize Joe Biden is slowing down. We all knew he was slowing down 4 years ago. It doesn't matter. Are you going to destroy Grandpa or lift him up? I say lift him up. He's been in Washington for more than 50 years. He knows how things get done. Lift him up. Fight harder for him. unless it's August 1st and this thing is imploding. As much as I would like a woman and a person of color to get elected president, I'm not sure Kamala Harris can beat Trump. Maybe she could. Maybe. I don't know. And right now, it may not be the best time to find out. The Democratic Convention starts August 19th. Okay, so what is that, 5 weeks away? 6 weeks away? We will see a lot of polling between now and then to determine how bad the debate performance actually was. Now, the only way Biden steps aside is if he wants to. There really is no mechanism in place to remove him. There is, but they're not going to employ it. Let me repeat. This is, I think, the most reasonable response to Thursday night's debate that you're going to hear. Don't get rid of Joe. Fight harder for him. But if a month from now we see polling that says he's not going to win, I will be the first one to say, let's thank him for his service and figure out a way to replace him. Now, the smartest move, if it gets to be this bad, and I don't think it's going to happen, I think voters know what the stakes are, and I think they're very forgiving. And most Americans didn't even watch the debate. The smartest move, if he has to go, would be to resign the presidency before the convention and crown Kamala president at the convention. You know, had Bill Clinton done that before he was impeached, Al Gore, if he just quit and let Al Gore become president, I suspect Al Gore would have beaten George W. Bush in 2000 when he was running for re-election. This is America, though. That doesn't happen. Macron in France just called a snap election. That's been a disaster. Prime ministers come and go in Great Britain. Here in America, our presidents cling to power and they don't go to prison. Trump will be the first, hopefully. Again, the polls. I know a lot of my listeners say don't pay attention to the polls. Well, here's an example of why you need to follow the good polls. A new Morning Consult poll taken right after the debate. It's a poll of 10,679 registered voters, shows Trump up by 1. Now, yes, there are polls showing a 10% jump in Democrats who think Biden should quit. Yes, there's a poll that I showed you that says 60% of voters think Biden should drop out. But that doesn't mean they're not going to vote for Biden come November. People are in a state of panic. I'm not. Should Biden stay in, and I'm pretty confident he will, Americans will settle down, realize this is what's being served, and we will see the polling revert to where it was before the debate. The election going into the convention in August will be a dead heat. There are a lot of horrible things Donald Trump has said since the debate. Now, Biden should hold a press conference. Biden has held the fewest number of press conferences of any president since Ronald Reagan. Well, Reagan and Biden both had staffs that try to protect them from public gaffes. What Joe Biden needs to do right now is hold a 90-minute, 2-hour press conference without a teleprompter. Now, the speech he gave the next day after the debate was great, but it wasn't the old Joe. Let's stop kidding ourselves. It's not that difficult to deliver a speech. Yes, the State of the Union was great, and he ad-libbed and he took on the hecklers. No president at any State of the Union in modern American history has been as disrespected as Joe Biden has been at these State of the Unions. And he's done great, but these are speeches. So he should do a press conference, a free-for-all. Go 90 minutes, 2 hours, toe-to-toe with the press. Show us what you got. And then, should the polls continue to tank, I think he needs to be told to go. But only if the polls are tanking. Joe Biden is who Donald Trump wants to run against. On his last radio show, Steve Bannon, before going to prison, said the worst thing that could happen to Donald Trump is they replace Biden with a younger candidate. A month from now, if it looks like Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania are going to Trump, and I don't think we're going to see those polls, then the Democrats are going to have to call on Biden to step down as the nominee. And I can see him or Jill getting there if the polls are disastrous. I don't think that's happening. I don't. What's in my mouth? Why is there cat fur in my mouth? I don't have a cat. I don't see that happening. I think he's going to bounce back. I think the polls are going to surprise us. I could be wrong. Now, look, I was wrong. I said we were going to be mocking Donald Trump's performance. Look, the election is 4 months away. Right now, there are no good choices except for one: Biden over Trump. Give it a month. The Supreme Court on Monday ruled former presidents are entitled to some immunity from prosecution for crimes they committed while serving in the Oval Office. This decision delays the special counsel Jack Smith's election interference prosecution of Donald Trump until after the November election, with the Supreme Court Monday remanding the case, sending the case back down to the lower courts for clarification, as I said they would. The news coming out of the Supreme Court on Monday was not as bad as it appears. I remain optimistic. Yes, Trump's criminal trial is most definitely delayed until after November. But that's a good thing. We saw from the Manhattan criminal trial, throughout the month of May, as that trial was going on, Trump got a significant bump in the polls, and his campaign contributions skyrocketed because he was perceived as the martyr. As much as I want Donald Trump locked away for life, reality on the ground is Joe Biden has a better chance of beating Trump when Trump has to run on the issues, not as a victim. The court has opened the door for an evidentiary hearing inside Judge Tanya Chutkan's Washington, D.C. courtroom sometime before the election, when prosecutors will have to present their case, present their evidence in order to prove all the crimes they have charged Trump with were in no way related to his official capacity as president. If they hold this evidentiary hearing in October, it could prove embarrassing for Donald Trump. That's essentially the gist of Monday's ruling. A president does not enjoy, according to the court, absolute immunity from criminal prosecution after they leave office. The court ruled that an ex-president can be tried for unofficial acts that were criminal that he committed while president. And there was some good news for Joe Biden in the Supreme Court ruling. The court said that a former president cannot be prosecuted for failing to enforce the law. As recently as Sunday, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham warned that the criminal prosecutions of Donald Trump opened a Pandora's box, and that when Biden leaves office, he should be prepared to be tried in a criminal courtroom for failing to enforce laws that prevent migrants from sneaking over the border. But John Roberts, the Chief Justice, in the ruling, made such an indictment impossible. In his ruling, Roberts wrote, quote, "Virtually every president is criticized for insufficiently enforcing some aspect of federal law, such as drug, gun, immigration, or environmental laws. An enterprising prosecutor in a new administration may assert that a previous president violated that broad statute. Without immunity, such types of prosecutions of ex-presidents would quickly become routine," unquote. The court officially rebuffed Trump's argument that a former president can only be tried in a criminal court if he has first been impeached by Congress and then convicted by the Senate. You might remember that Trump's attorneys during oral arguments maintained that even if a former president led a coup against the government or ordered SEAL Team 6 to murder his political opponent, the only way you could hold the former president criminally accountable is if he is first removed from office by the Senate following an impeachment. Look, there's a lot of stuff in Monday's ruling that we already knew. Former presidents can't be tried for crimes committed in their official capacity as president. We knew that. We knew that they couldn't be tried for any crimes they committed in their official capacity as president, and we knew the court was going to remind us of that. It's not the end of the world. Again, it's a good thing that Trump isn't going on trial again before the election. If he were to go on trial and then win the election, partly because he was on trial, I think if he goes on trial, it'll help him win the election, he could then pardon himself. It's supposedly unclear as to whether a president can pardon himself. But how do you think this court would rule a year from now on whether a President Donald Trump can pardon himself? Of course, this court would rule that President Donald Trump could pardon himself. If you want Donald Trump behind bars, the way I do, there's only one way to accomplish that, and that is beat him first at the ballot box. This majority in the court never wanted Donald Trump on trial during the lead up to the November election. We all know there was no need for the court to take this case. There was no need for clarification from the lower courts. There was no need to take the case, and there was no need to kick it back down for clarification. Monday's ruling created busy work. The court just wants to spin the wheels of justice until after the election when, if Biden is reelected, the trials will resume, or if Trump is elected, the trials will be suspended after Trump orders his Justice Department to drop all the charges, and then he will issue himself and his defendants, his co-defendants, a blanket pardon, whether that pardon is legal or not. The only way to lock this monster up is to beat him at the ballot box. Supposedly, Monday's ruling by the Supreme Court should have no bearing on the Fulton County RICO trial. Although this Supreme Court could probably find a way to block Fani Willis's prosecution of Trump should he somehow find his way back into the Oval Office. I wouldn't be surprised if this court found a way to allow a sitting president, if it's Donald Trump, to pardon himself for a state or local crime, even though his pardon power currently does not extend beyond the federal courts. Nothing is below this Supreme Court when it comes to protecting Donald Trump. This court is very much capable of extending a sitting president's pardon, sitting president's pardon power, all the way down to the states. You know that. So we have to beat Trump in November. We know everything Donald Trump has been charged with by the special counsel had zero relation to his official duties as president, as outlined in Article 2 of the Constitution. But Monday's decision by the court had nothing to do with the Constitution or the law. It was all about buying time so the American people decide in November whether Trump should stand trial. The Supreme Court politicized the trial. It's quite simple now. If Trump loses in November, he stands trial. If he wins, he doesn't stand trial. All thanks to the Supreme Court. Monday's ruling had nothing to do with Trump's guilt or innocence. This ruling is all about whether Trump should even be tried for attempting to overturn the 2020 election results. The court went out of its way before the trial even took place to rule that Trump's trial should be delayed. Under ordinary circumstances, Trump would have been tried in the lower court, and then on appeal, the Supreme Court could then rule as to whether he was unfairly prosecuted for criminal acts committed while carrying on his official presidential duties. It's rare for the Supreme Court to issue a ruling a priori before the trial even takes place. Last month, the court issued, this is an example of how the court normally works. Last month, the court issued a ruling that tossed out the convictions of about 300 January 6ers. And that doesn't mean those 300 January 6ers are going to be released. A lot of them are serving time on other charges as well. The Supreme Court ruled last week that the Justice Department applied the wrong criminal statute when they prosecuted some of these insurrectionists, charging them with obstructing a government proceeding. The court ruled that it was wrong for Jack Smith's special counsel to prosecute them using the statute charging them with obstructing a government proceeding. And part of Jack Smith's prosecution of Trump applies that same statute. And now that part of Trump's indictment has to be thrown out. But the court waited until after the trial of these 300 some odd January 6ers. They waited for the appeals process to wend its way through the system before they decided on whether the January 6ers were unfairly convicted of obstructing a government proceeding. The court didn't stop the trial and hold hearings as to whether the trial should take place, which is exactly what the Supreme Court has done by taking this presidential immunity case. The court is essentially forbidding the people from having their day in court, or at least from having their day in court until after November, when the people reelect Joe Biden, and then, and only then, can the people prosecute Donald Trump. Monday's ruling was the court playing for time. It's why they waited until the last possible day to issue their ruling. And again, as far as winning elections go, I'm not so sure it's a bad thing. This is the mop-up for July 2nd, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York. Thank you for finding me. And again, if you registered for my debate watch party and you couldn't get in, but you paid for it, please contact me using the email provided in your confirmation email, and I will reimburse you. Okay. I wanted to go over a couple of more things. Let me see. Let me go back to the court ruling. All right. How are we doing on time? All right, so let's go back. Let me just rehash where we are with this. The Supreme Court on Monday ruled that former presidents do enjoy some immunity from prosecution after they leave office, but only for crimes committed while performing their official role as chief executive. Despite arguments made by Trump's attorneys, the immunity is not absolute. But the court did rule that Trump cannot be tried for any crimes he may have committed when he urged officials in his Justice Department to promote the lie of election fraud. The court ruled that ex-presidents cannot be tried after leaving office for failing to enforce statutes on the books regarding immigration, guns, and drugs. That was a direct blow to Republicans like Lindsey Graham, who on Sunday warned that Joe Biden might be subject to indictment over his border policies after he leaves office. I'm just summing up what the ruling is, and then I'm going to end the show. The court asked the lower court for clarification as to whether Trump's conversations with Mike Pence, urging him not to certify the election on January 6, whether those conversations are immune from prosecution. And the court also asked the lower court for clarification as to whether Trump was performing an official act as chief executive when he urged local officials to overturn the election results, or when he helped organize phony slates of electors in Georgia, Arizona, Nevada, Michigan, and Wisconsin. I'll continue on this on the next show. I think I'm going to wrap it up. I made the mistake of reading the decision. That's it. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. Thank you to Bob in the chat room for keeping the conversation civil. If you liked any of this, please hit the like button, share it, subscribe to my newsletter, and to be continued. Thank you.